Oscar maybe kind of get us up to date on where things stand?
So we had, after we lost the appeal of, so we vacated Andre's conviction based upon ineffective assistance of counsel in December 2022. Then the people of the state of New York, the DA's office from Bronx County, appealed that. That appeal took approximately 2 years. And on Christmas Eve, literally 2024, the appellate division reversed the vacatur, which meant that Andre would have 17 years of jail to complete on his 40-year sentence. So the DA actually then, on Christmas Eve, filed a letter saying that they're ready for Andre's surrender on December 26th. So just for a quick little background, once the conviction was overturned, the vacatur of the conviction was overturned, Andre's status was a sentenced New York State prisoner who was outside the prison walls. And even though we had the right to seek leave to appeal, the statute and some case law says he must be surrendered forthwith into the custody of the correctional facility. So the DA cites that and says, we're ready on December 26th. I originally was not even going to tell Andre that the conviction's vacatur was reversed because I figured let him have a Christmas without this bad news. But once the DA said they want him to surrender on December 26th, I had to call him and the family and tell him what happened. We then started a flurry on Christmas Eve, asking the judge to postpone the surrender to the first Tuesday after New Year's, basically. I think it was January 9th we might have been asking for. I can't remember the date now. And the judge gave us that date. In between that period of time, we then had to seek leave to file to the Court of Appeals. We contacted Darcel. We got a lot of pressure on the fact that we wanted an adjournment of Andre's surrender while leave was sought. They gave us that leave. And we filed leave to the Court of Appeals. Leave was denied. We also simultaneously filed a petition with the governor for clemency. And I'm shortening what was a really stressful, heightened time. We got the DA to consent to keep Andre out pending the governor's decision on clemency. We filed it on an emergency basis. What we did then was the judge agreed to that. The governor never decided Andre's clemency petition and instead said it's under review, but we're not going to be able to decide it before the current surrender date. So we then filed a motion under CPL 440.20 to have Andre resentenced based on ineffective assistance of counsel at the time of sentence. We had won initially ineffective assistance of counsel at trial. That's what was reversed. So now we were arguing ineffective assistance of counsel at the time of sentence, and that therefore his sentence was unconstitutional. And we argued that he was ineffective because he, A, failed to investigate and present any evidence of mitigation, and B, inflamed the judge by attacking him. We kept going. We put together really a very large group of lawyers to give the strongest application to the motion for resentencing, and we got the DA consented to keep Andre out while the resentencing motion was pending. We then met with the DA, presented we hired a mitigation expert. We, like I said, had legal scholars talking about resentencing, and we presented all that to the DA's office. We filed our written motion, and the DA, we basically listed the four elements or so that we thought the lawyer was ineffective, and the district attorney's office consented on one of those arguments, that he, inflamed the jury and inflamed the judge, excuse me, by attacking the victims, and did nothing to investigate, the mitigation. And so then the judge would not tell us, what the decision was. He was going to decide from the bench. And so on December 1st of 2025, the judge issued his ruling, finding that, agreeing with our position on the area that the people consented to, and vacated and resentenced Andre to essentially two 20-year terms on each one count of the attempted murder charge. He had two attempted murder charges, and he sentenced him to two 20-year terms, which is what the original judge sentenced him to. However, the original judge said those two terms needed to run consecutively, one after the other, for a total of 40. This judge changed that to two 20-year terms to run concurrently. And there's a mandatory period of 2.5 years of post-release supervision. However, since Andre served 23 years, those 2.5 years were covered by his prison sentence, meaning that Andre had no further ties, if you will, to the criminal justice system. And so while his conviction was not vacated, at the very least, he now has no threat of having to reserve the last 17 years. So it's a long, strange trip, to quote the late, great Bob Weir, but that's where we are now.
So, nice to meet you, Andre. I've been following your case for quite some time, done several stories. Some of our interns did some stories as well. Um, so I'll start with congratulations.
Thank you so much. So nice to meet you as well. Really appreciate you. Thank you and your entire team for covering this case. Oscar's really modest, and so is Jeff. They give you the fingernail of the story. They didn't give you the whole body that's been walking in through the graveyard. So, this thing has been such a long journey for the attorneys, for my family, of course, and of course, just me in my mind, right? Thinking that I may return to prison. And a 17-year prison after doing 23 years at the age of 49 would have been a death sentence for me, especially losing my beautiful family.
And especially after being out for almost 4 years.
3 years.
Three.
Yeah.
3 years, yeah.
So I mean, what was that like? I mean, I've talked to other people that have gone through this kind of limbo, and they don't know how to get into their lives again because they're not sure if they're going to go back to prison.
Well, for me, it's been a 26-year journey, right? Because 23 years on the inside, 3 years, the district attorney appealing this process. And it was almost as if I was at sea waiting on just treading water. And I had the entire team pulling me into their life rafts. And at every given moment, a current was coming by the district attorney to wash me back away from them, right? These individuals that you see before you, excluding me, are remarkable. Jeffrey Deskovic, Oscar Michelen, I have to mention Vanessa Podkins, Rebecca Brown. There are a litany of individuals who are in this situation. And I'm just eternally grateful for what they do. Karen Newworth, of course, Corey, the mitigator, and of course, my wife, my loving wife who supported me. There are just so many for me to mention. And if I'm not mentioning many, please forgive me. You guys know how much I love each and every one of you. From Gia.
I would add Steve Zeidman from
Oh, of
CUNY Law
course.
because he's
Yes.
the maven on these resentence
Yes.
440s.
Thank you,
So
Oscar.
it was I joke, I normally say that it takes a village. I mean, this took a county, took the entire county to get this done. And then finally, Darcel willing to listen to the arguments and coming to join us,
Yeah,
because I don't know what the judge would have done if they had opposed it. There was certainly no guarantee he would have granted it. So that was a big help to have the DA final, consent to the application.
for sure.
Yeah, it seems like the DA acted unusually in this case. In that at first they're pushing for, the immediate return to prison, but then, they're willing to at least listen.
Yeah, I think that comes from the fact that it was initially handled by the appeals division, which, they've got one job, which is legally that they were right on the law. They never made any argument on the law that was not correct. So they just like, well, this is what has to happen. Here's the statute. They don't look at it from any other point of view other than what does the law require. So, the appeals lawyers are the ones who did that. Once you get it into the Conviction Integrity Bureau, you got to step outside that now. And, we met, and Darcel Clark met with us personally. It wasn't that we met with just the head of the CIB, which we did, but also her deputy chief, her chief of staff, her general counsel, and herself were all brought to bear on this. So that kind of changes things when now it's like, well, wait a minute. And I think the main thing was that the main argument that I think resonated with DA Clark, and the one that she ultimately agreed with us on in court in papers, was that if this crime had happened now under her administration, she would not have asked for 40 years. Whether Andre was guilty, whether it was a close call, whether it was an easy call, whatever it might be, for these two crimes at his age, the Bronx DA would not seek 40 years right now. So why should he stay there when we wouldn't ask for this now? And the time that he had served is something that we would feel justice was served. He's done enough time. Plus, and again, in their consent, they acknowledged how well and how much Andre had done in the 3 years that he was out. So it's different legal arguments, Dave. I think, and that's what it was. She didn't weigh in on the appeal issue. That's the appellate unit, with appellate bureau within her office. It was only when it came to something that she would look directly at and say, yeah, I wouldn't ask for this now, and I'm comfortable that 20 years, 23 years is enough time for this. And she's more than willing to say that, on the record. So I think it was really the change of focus that caused the change of position.
Why did the appellate court overturn the initial ruling? No idea.
Oh, I have an idea. I got to tell you, when I orally argued it, I kind of felt like Dorothy, like on the yellow brick road. I'm like, where are we right now? Because all they kept focusing on was that it could have been strategy for Andre's trial lawyer to not present the clear evidence of Andre's medical impossibility to commit this crime. He could not have ran in the manner in which the perpetrator was described by everybody to have run, even catching up to the victims as they ran down the street. And we presented Andre's, trauma surgeon to testify that, in his opinion, it would have been impossible to make such a quick recovery. The problem was, of course, we were looking at a case from, the year 1999, and there were no rehab records. So the Appeals Bureau argued that the doctor couldn't definitively state what Andre's physical condition was at the time of the shooting, and that therefore it was not sufficient evidence that a medical impossibility defense would have prevailed, against the eyewitnesses who testified. But the appellate division, I feel, gave short shrift and ignored other very salient facts, including Andre's lawyer was a made member of the Bonanno crime family, that he didn't investigate the medical evidence at all. So whether it was viable or not, it was never investigated. That we produced credible evidence of a third-party suspect that not only was 1 inch shorter than Andre, but the exact same weight as Andre, had a motive, and his face resembled Andre's, so it could have easily been confused in these very quick identifications. We called one of the leading identification experts to say this is completely understandable that this would be a misidentification under these factors. And so I just felt that they really just cared about the finality of the case. So often we when Jeff and I talk to groups about wrongful conviction, we say that the criminal justice system prefers finality over anything else. And that's really was the tone of not only the oral argument, but the decision. I don't think there was a very in-depth analysis into the evidence that Jeff, Andre, and I presented at the hearing. And, David, from covering these stories, that many, many times it takes repeated attempts to get people to understand what actually happened. And, it's not unusual for an innocent person to lose their first 440. And it's not even unusual to win a 440 and then have it reversed. I mean, it's rare, but it does happen, So I think Andre's story is a testament to how hard it is and how much it takes to overturn, a jury verdict.
Yeah, and this one is pretty convoluted in terms of all the twists and turns. Jeff, I mean, is this one of the crazier ones you've seen?
It is for a number of reasons. I mean, outside of a DNA case, I mean, Andre has the strongest non-DNA innocence claim I've ever seen. I mean, just to recap briefly what Oscar mentioned, from the medical impossibility evidence to the alternative suspect who resembled him, who, by the way, was implicated by 2 witnesses who had been in a shootout with the victims before. There was, it was all corroborated by ballistics. I mean, if that's not enough, what is? I would even rate that level of evidence of innocence to be on par with a DNA exclusion in terms of the strength. So that was certainly bizarre. The way that the appellate division just twisted and twist things around to strain to try to claim that was strategic not to put in the medical evidence, that was bizarre. The existence of the Bonanno crime family lawyer and witness protection, who, per his testimony, from the very first day of his practice of law, he began his criminality, was for the sole purpose of passing messages back and forth. Those things were very bizarre. A grand jury testimony, one of the witnesses never even testified at the trial and therefore was never subjected to cross-examination, her getting key details wrong as well. This is really up there, and just finally, Andre coming more than 5 times. That was the abbreviated version Oscar gave you. Okay, more than 5 occasions, Andre was 1 or 2 days out. In one instance, a couple of hours out from being wrongfully imprisoned. I mean, that in and of itself was
Yeah.
was bizarre.
We were actually. I'm glad Jeff mentioned that, David, because we were actually at the courthouse waiting to go in, and then we got the last word that we got consent to stay out pending all these reviews. So it came very close. I do have to run, unfortunately. I don't know if there's anything specific that you want to ask me, but I think Jeff
I
and
think I'm
Andre can
good
more coverage
on
from here.
you. I want to talk to Andre a little bit here.
Of course.
Um,
All right. Take care, everybody.
Thanks,
David,
Oscar.
I don't want to leave without telling you that I so appreciate how much the Vanguard is always on top of this issue and always highlights this issue because it's so important. People think, oh, it just happens so easily, but you've not only just been following the story, but you and your team have consistently shed light on these issues in the criminal justice system. And I just want to tell you personally how much I appreciate the work that you do on this.
Thank you. Andre,
Yes.
how did you get into this mess in the first place? And
I
what were
mean,
you thinking as this thing is unfolding?
you know, I'm just thinking about my life itself. How I got into this mess, I thought that we actually unraveled it. Um, when Jeff came on board, it was a breath of fresh air as Oscar had been pumping oxygen into my lungs for a very long time by himself. And it's very hard work, for one attorney to do what he does so well, right? Oscar's a great, great attorney. And then Jeff came on board with more supplies and more tools. And they both said, we're going to keep this guy alive. And we're going to make sure that, not only is he alive, he's well healed up and he's ready to just live a free life, you know, unscathed, right? Because it's one thing, David, when you come out of prison and you're totally scarred up and it's recognizable for the masses. But the miraculous surgery that they did, Oscar and Jeff, in this case, it allowed me to come out as if no one even knew I was in prison, right? When they would speak to me, they would say to me, Andre, you're always smiling. Why are you smiling? And they didn't understand that I was smiling because I had made two of the greatest friends of my lifetime. I was back with my family. I was a free man again to understand society itself and incorporate this new technology that had me so, obfuscated. Little things such as an iPhone, right? I didn't know how to work these devices. So I was just so joyful, David, and I'm just so grateful continuously. And it's an enigma to answer that question. I don't know how I got involved with the situation. When I say involved, I mean how it got all tangled back up again, right? How the district attorney wanted to appeal this vacated sentence and why the appellate division said, you know what, we're going to reverse this case after they had all of the mitigating evidence, having the medical evidence, having the testimony of my doctor who performed the surgery on me, and him stating that I could not possibly have run an entire city block without a limp, a noticeable limp, to run two um, individuals down, excuse me, on a city street, right? And it would have been totally noticeable. So for that reason, it is still an enigma in everybody's mind. But I'm just so grateful for this entire team that I had. And as Jeff alluded to, Oscar just gave you a preliminary of this movie that's gonna eventually happen.
Yeah, it sounds like a movie. It also sounds a little bit like my cousin Vinny because the cars and they're like, hey, the similarity in the cars and like
Yes.
the fact that you resemble the actual perpetrator. I mean, I always say like it takes horrible luck to get wrongly convicted, but it takes amazing luck to get out.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. And, it's not even luck, it's divine intervention, David. I had numerous communities of prayer warriors on the front line. And I'm also so grateful to them for what they did and just continuously uplifting my wife and my children to keep them protected from the dangers of fear of their hearts being shattered, right? um, to continuously give Oscar Michelen and Jeffrey Deskovic the wisdom to move forward with what they needed to present to the court and how they needed to litigate this case and how they needed to do everything that they did to keep me where I am today. This is a miraculous work of God, David. And, it's very eerie because there's a guy that's named Sam that I just recently spoke to, and his case was overturned the same month as mine. And they ordered him back in within 24 hours. They didn't do that with me. And, I understand now that that was God giving us enough time to iron out the wrinkles in this case to keep me free.
Yeah, I mean that's amazing. I mean, uh, so I mean, are you calm during this time, or are you just on eggshells, or I mean,
Well, listen, I tell everybody the truth when it comes to this matter. I was not calm. I mean, in front of my wife and my children, I was the calmest individual, of course, because they were going through their fears. But I didn't get any sleep, right? I would stay up at nights watching my wife sleep. I would go into my children's rooms and I would look at them sleeping and then kiss them both on the forehead. And I would just roam in the house at night thinking and thinking and thinking, trying to get out of this mess and trying to just add something on to the prolific work of all these brilliant attorneys. And when I tell you, David, it has been brilliant attorneys on board. There really has, from Vanessa Parkins to Steve Zeidman. I mentioned Oscar and Jeff. Even Wilmer Hale came on board. So many attorneys have come on board from Elizabeth Felber and Thomas Hoffman, giving just more insight. So many attorneys wanted to make sure that this injustice didn't happen.
and Jeff, from your perspective, what does this case tell us about the system?
I mean, I think it tells us a lot about, not wanting to admit the error. I mean, I really do, appreciate that the Bronx DA's office eventually consented to Andre being, resentenced. But this really, as far as the conviction, I mean, it clearly was ineffective assistance of counsel for his trial lawyer to not present the medical impossibility evidence. That was clear. I don't see how they could legitimately disagree with that, or to say, well, that wouldn't have caused reasonable doubt in at least one juror's mind, right? If not producing a whole outright acquittal. I mean, what is that? Just some sort of a happy coincidence that Andre got shot in an unrelated incident so that he could then introduce that a year later to try to get away with the double attempted murder. I mean, that's I don't get that. Of course, it was clearly not strategic, that it was ineffective. So not so appealing that, and then also, getting a ruling like that where it was just a finality of conviction and stretching and straining. So I think it tells us a whole lot about not wanting to admit an error. I think it tells us a whole lot about how the system continues to prioritize and value finality of conviction over accuracy. And those messages are disturbing. The same thing, I don't get how the Court of Appeals wouldn't give us permission to appeal such an, obviously incorrect decision by the appellate division. Although, the Court of Appeals, I mean, they grant very few defendants permission to appeal. The judge we drew, Judge Garcia, has the lowest grant percentage of any of the judges there in terms of granting permission to appeal. So all those things are very alarming to me. In terms of that finality of conviction, it tells me we still have a very, very long way to go in terms of improving the justice system. In terms of catching and correcting wrongful conviction in the normal course of the appellate process. I think about the implications of that appellate division ruling. So if they're going to just stretch and strain and invent things to say strategies, so then what are we saying? That there is no, unless an attorney outright says the magic words, hey, I was ineffective, that nobody can win based on that ground? No attorney, very few attorneys are going to say that. He didn't say it was strategic. He claimed he couldn't remember anything. At that point, the record should speak for itself. The appellate division decision never wrestled with the alternative suspect, the two witnesses that implicated him and the ballistics. This wasn't just that the prosecution appealed the reversal. We cross appealed. We appealed Judge Lewis's decision, which denied our actual innocence claim, which denied our newly discovered evidence claim. And the court never wrestled with those issues. It's as if all of that didn't exist at all whatsoever. And remember, we're talking about ballistics too. And the two witnesses who implicated this alternative suspect, their names appeared in the record, before and after the trial. It's just they couldn't get subpoenaed because the trial lawyer couldn't find an address for them. It's not like these are 11th hour, 20 years later, out of the woodwork. Well, where have you been all this time? Type of people. Their names appeared before in the record. I don't get what else you need. So, it's disturbing to me. It really reinforces one thing, and I'll sum up. I've probably been too long already, but I have to say that as someone who's been wrongfully imprisoned and exonerated myself, who lost 7 appeals, and also as a lawyer who put hundreds and hundreds of hours into this case, it takes a lot of wind out of the sails. It's very demotivating to know you can put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours into the case, have all the facts and the law correct. And if the court is just going to look at finality of conviction, rather than accuracy, rather than really doing in-depth analysis and really wrestle with the facts and the law, that you're going to lose. So then what's the point of all of this? How do the courts even retain even an iota of their legitimacy? To me, they don't. So those are my thoughts.
Seems like we should be further now, given everything we know.
Right.
Yeah.
The DNA exonerations have opened a window into the justice system so that we know all about false confessions and misidentifications, bad lawyering, which appeared here, the prosecutorial misconduct. I mean, again, recall that the prosecution revealed during this appeal process and the post-conviction process that the victims actually were involved in drug selling, which
Right.
again doesn't mean they should have been shot or harmed. We're not saying that, but what we're saying is that the picture of them, these law-abiding people, that was a totally different thing, and that by itself opens up reasonable doubt, because if you're going to drug deal and if you're going to run a block, then that creates motivation
Right.
for other drug sellers to want to take over the block, and therefore other people other than Andre could have committed the crime. So some of those things which the DNA examiner opened the window existed in this case. And, last thing I'll say, DNA only around 10% of all serious felony cases, which is why it's so critical that those deficiencies in the justice system that we know cause wrongful conviction be addressed through remedial legislation, because what happened before 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago can just as easily happen now, because those deficiencies are not as yet corrected, and DNA simply won't be a factor in 90% of the cases because there's nothing to test.
And just to add on to what Jeff said just now, some of the key and strongest points within this case is, I'm sorry, guys, is the fact that, when this shootout occurred about 3 days prior to the crime, these strong ballistics that was evident during the course of this entire case should have been evident enough that I was innocent, because of the fact that one of the victims himself was caught with one of the weapons that was used on January 11th to have a shootout with the actual third-party culpable suspect in this case. He was caught with that weapons, and those ballistics were matched to the gun that was fired on the 11th. And they did not have the other match to the ballistics until the 15th, when those second set of bullets again were fired out of the perpetrator's gun who committed this crime. Another part of this key evidence is that during the course of trial, I had a ventimiglia hearing, and one of the individuals in this case who was severely harmed, he indicated that I was not the perpetrator in that shootout. And then he took the Fifth Amendment because he was caught with the gun in this case. So he didn't want to give the strongest narrative of my innocence, but it's alluded to throughout everything that he was saying, that I was not the individual who shot at him, because they were trying to tie that in to say I had a motive to come back on the 15th and then shoot these two individuals. That motive was destroyed by this individual, the victim in this crime. So, they understood with all of the evidence, including the medical evidence, that I could not have ran to commit this crime. I did not have a weapon that they tried to say was probably fungible. I didn't do this crime, David. And that's the bottom line here. And the public at large needs to understand that continuously, that we're going to continuously fight for my innocence, for my honor, for my family name, and to get the justice that I deserve.
I want to build off Andre's point, the last thing that he said, which is just what's next for Andre Brown and Andre Brown's case. Oscar and I are the next are still, we're not done trying to exonerate Andre. We are going to file a petition for writ of habeas corpus, which of course, as you know, is when a state prisoner is arguing that his or her conviction was obtained in violation of the constitutional rights. And in that argument, we're obviously going to continue to litigate the ineffective assistance of counsel claim. We're going to make an actual innocence, argument as well. That was one of our claims at the 440 hearing and then on the appeal. So we're going to continue to litigate. One of the reasons why we continue to do interviews is we hope that if any of the listeners out there have any firsthand information about the crime, that they can come forward. So we'll investigate and track down, try to verify that. And if there's something there, then file. They're bringing that evidence to the attention of the court is certainly a possibility. So we're not done. So that's next. But let me mention one other thing that just to back up, this kind of out of order, but I think that one of the factors that really helped Andre, in terms of the resentencing, was that Andre was exemplary during his several years of freedom. Working at the nonprofit Choice, working with at-risk youth, teaming up, being deployed in the Opportunity for Youth part in the New Rochelle City Court under Judge Rice, working with at-risk youth, developing GED program, participating in book club, chess club. He was an ambassador in the innocence community. Andre traveled with me, and at times Oscar and I, and sometimes just frankly on his own. we're doing presentations at various colleges and other venues talking about, wrongful conviction. So my point is only, not only did he not get in trouble while he was released, but that exemplary giving back work, in addition to being a family man, who I think were big factors in the judge determining that, we're safer. This was an unusual statement by the judge at the resentencing hearing that, the community is safer with Andre being out of prison than we are with him being in it. I mean, how often does that ever get
Yeah.
said at sentencing? I think never. But come to find out that, at least to this stage, at least to this point, the narrative around his case, Andre's work while out of prison has actually been the single most important factor in terms of where the case is right now, even aside from the facts and the law. I mean, that's really how he's still out. Without that, I mean, that undercut a lot of our resentencing motion. Yeah, sure, he would not be likely to get the time now, but in the background, right behind it, look at all that stuff that he did. It's not like we're speculating on what he's going to do if he's released. It's been proven and lived.
Yeah, I think, I was thinking that when Oscar mentioned it too, was that, when the judge is making the decision between consecutive and concurrent, uh, you know, they're much more, comfortable with that decision when you have a 3-year track record where the guy's doing great stuff in the community, and you're like, yeah, okay, let's err on the side of letting him out.
Right, because look, no matter how great somebody's record is while they're in, okay, there's still even like at least a little bit of doubt about what they're actually going to do when they
Right.
come out. Even the best of bets has a small possibility that it might go the other way, and that's really what parole boards and other people, who have to make decisions about letting people out, are concerned with. That it's going to be a headline. Why was this person let out? That it blew up in their face. Here, that risk simply didn't exist.
So, Andre, let me ask you one other question. I mean, Jeff kind of anticipated one of my last questions, but what are your plans at this point?
Well, I'm currently in the process of opening up a nonprofit myself called the Smart Foundation, and the Smart Foundation standing for Students Mentored as Real Treasures. Um, we're moving forward with a campaign called Dunk Your Fear, for the youth, right, who have negative connotations, who are bullied, who are in the mindset that they can't complete their greatest task, whether it's education, whether it's athleticism, whether it is their own journey to become a great person, right? I have always been an individual that is trying to develop the youth. From the first time I saw a young man at the age of 17 in state prison, and he was lost, and all he understood was the gang. So from that point on, I said, they need a change, and they need somebody to lead them into the new front, and to allow them to understand that education is key, right? And to understand themselves first and put God into their lives, and then they can transform and transmute into the new person that they choose to be. So from that point on, my mindset has always been to move forward into communities, put 2 hands and 2 feet forward, to grab on tight to those individuals who will allow me to take them into the new frontier.
All right. I think that's good unless you have one other thing to add, Jeff.
Maybe the last quick point I'll just mention, is, Andre's family was something else, a strong issue that we raised as a non-legal additional point beyond his difference making work in the community. Just what the impact on his family would be. His son, AJ, who's been many years without Andre, and AJ, of course, being 14, and finally getting his dad back in his life on an everyday basis in the free world. And what the implications of a return back to prison would be for him, Andre's daughter Trinity, of course, the relationship with his wife, just tearing a family apart, which what the practical effect of that was. That what the family angle to this was definitely something that we emphasized, particularly in the clemency application, and then we repurposed and inserted that into the resentencing. The last thing is I think that what gets lost in a lot of cases is um, not just that it's not words on a piece of paper, but a person. But then even when you see them, it's not just them; it's also the implications for their family and their real friends.
And for me, the one of the things that I want to really highlight within the content of this article is the strength of a woman, right? My wife has been the backbone of this family for so long, and it really needs to be said of her strength, right? Moving forward as a nurturer, a protector, while I wasn't home and guiding my two children. My daughter just graduated from college. AJ is a high honor student. He's a top athlete. And all that started before I got here, right? She kept these two kids totally enforced and in a sanctuary of peace while all this chaos was going on. And she herself just kept great composure. So, for all the women readers, they need to understand that they can accomplish their greater goals of getting their spouse or their loved one out of prison to continue to keep on with the great faith that they will have in God for change and that their loved one will be coming out. And she also sends her strength to the many women out there that are still fighting for their loved ones within the confines of prison.
Great. All right. Well, Andre, congratulations.
Thank
Good
you so much.
luck. And I look forward to seeing great things from you. And Jeff, keep going.
Will do.
and
Will do.
and David, listen, thank you so much for your continuous just journalism, right? If it wasn't for great journalists like you who put the truth at the forefront of the just the masses of people who are reading, because sometimes you just read all of these articles that just are false narratives, and you're always putting forth the truth so that people can understand not only the difficulties of overturned conviction, but just the legal system itself, and also the love of a community that it takes to free just one person. So I really appreciate you and your entire team for all the hard work that you continually do and consistently do.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good
Thank you so
day.
much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye, guys.